The downfall of Brightwell Enterprises started with one simple mistake. A door that should have never been shut. Xavier Cole, a quiet tech genius with a hidden past, walked into the company's modern lobby wearing simple clothes and calm confidence. He didn't have a badge or an appointment, just a reason to be there. The receptionist barely looked at him before calling security. "Deliveries are in the back," she said. But Xavier didn't get angry. Even when they kicked him out, even when they acted like he didn't matter, he stayed calm. By sunset, the company's top leaders would start to panic. By the end of the week, long-buried secrets would come to light. Xavier wasn't back for revenge. He came to take back what had been stolen from him. The taxi rolled up to the modest motel just outside Phoenix. The heat of the day still clung to the pavement as Jordan Hayes stepped out, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He looked around. Nothing out of the ordinary. A tired sign blinked vacancy in flickering red neon. The desk clerk barely looked up when Jordan entered. "Cash or card?" "Cash," Jordan replied, sliding over a few folded bills. "No ID?" Jordan hesitated for a second, then shook his head. "Lost it in Denver." The man shrugged, handed him a key. "Room 7. No questions asked." Jordan walked across the lot, the desert wind kicking up dust behind him. He slipped into the room and locked the door behind him. Inside it was small, quiet, forgettable, just what he needed. He dropped the duffel on the bed and sat down heavily. For a moment his face softened, worry slipping into the lines of his jaw. He opened the bag and pulled out a leather notebook, thumbing through pages of notes, clippings, and one photograph, crumpled but clear. A woman, smiling, holding a baby. He stared at it, jaw tight. The knock came late. 3 soft taps, then silence. Jordan's hand reached instinctively for the drawer, where a folded pocket knife lay. He slid it open just enough to grab it before walking toward the door. He opened it a crack. Outside stood a woman, mid-30s, sharp eyes, long braid over her shoulder. She wore a navy suit that didn't match the dusty parking lot behind her. "Mr. Hayes?" she asked, calm but firm. "Depends who's asking." She held up a badge. "Agent Riley Brooks, Department of Homeland Security." Jordan didn't open the door further. "I've already told your people everything I know." "You haven't told anyone anything in 5 years," she said. "Mind if I come in?" He stared at her, then opened the door. Inside, she scanned the room in a glance. No weapons, no signs of chaos. Just a worn man trying to disappear. She didn't sit. "You worked at Wellspring Tech. Classified cybersecurity contracts. You vanished after the breach in 2018. Everyone thought you were dead." "Maybe that's how I liked it," Jordan replied. Agent Brooks didn't flinch. "We found evidence. Someone's been accessing old Wellspring files. Someone using your encryption signature." Jordan looked away. "Not me." "Then you should be worried, because someone wants people to believe it is." He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "What's in that notebook?" He stiffened. "Nothing that concerns you." "Then why?" she said, pulling something from her jacket pocket. "Was this in our recovered data dump?" She tossed it onto the bed. A photograph. The same one Jordan had just been holding. The woman. The baby. Jordan's face changed. Just slightly. But enough. Brooks didn't press. She let the silence stretch. "I'm not here to arrest you," she said. "Not yet. But something bigger's coming. And whether you want to admit it or not, you're already in it." She turned to leave. Before she reached the door, Jordan spoke. Quiet, but sharp. "Where did you get that photo?" Brooks paused. "That's what I was going to ask you." Inside the boardroom of Brightwell Enterprises, tensions simmered just below the polished surface. Mark Reynolds, the executive vice president who had earlier watched Xavier Cole get escorted out without lifting a finger, now sat at the head of the long oak conference table. His fingers drummed anxiously on his legal pad, not out of nerves, but anticipation. He had spent years climbing the ranks under CEO Martin Brightwell's leadership. Now, with rumors swirling of a potential merger, Mark saw an opportunity to take the top seat. "Any word from PR about the morning incident?" asked Lila Davenport, Brightwell's head of communications, adjusting her glasses. Mark shrugged casually. "Handled. Probably just some influencer trying to pull a stunt." But it hadn't been. It had been Xavier Cole, one of the most powerful men in tech. A cybersecurity mogul with deep connections and a memory as sharp as his code. And he hadn't come to deliver a package. He had come with a purpose. Meanwhile, at a coffee shop a few blocks away, Xavier sat in a corner booth across from his longtime friend and legal counsel, Danielle Rhodes. She looked over the details he'd brought with a mix of awe and concern. "You're really doing this?" she asked, sipping her espresso. Xavier nodded once. "They humiliated me in front of a lobby full of people. Not because of who I am, but because of what I look like. And you're not just walking away?" "No," he said calmly. "I'm buying the company." Danielle leaned back in her seat. "You already own 8% through Shell Investments, and if you execute the remaining acquisition plan, you'll have a controlling stake in 48 hours. Xavier's face remained expressionless. "Then it's time to show them who they just shoved out the back door." Back at Brightwell HQ, Mark received a message on his phone. A private acquisition had been filed. Someone was buying up Brightwell stock at a rapid pace. "Get legal in here," he barked, rising to his feet. In the elevator down, panic was beginning to bloom. As the company's tech team uncovered that the mystery buyer wasn't a rival firm, but a private investor with tech roots, the pieces started to click. When they matched an IP trace to Cole Technologies' headquarters, jaws dropped. "Tell me this is a bluff," Mark said, storming into Martin Brightwell's office. The aging CEO looked pale. "It's not. I just got off the phone with the board. He's filing a motion for emergency shareholder review." Martin looked down, almost defeated. "Xavier Cole owns 51% as of this morning." That afternoon, a hush fell over the company as Xavier's name was officially announced in a press release sent by Brightwell's own PR department. Brightwell Enterprises is proud to announce a strategic realignment under the new executive leadership of Xavier Cole. No bells, no celebration, just silence. Down in the very same lobby where he'd been dismissed just 24 hours before, Xavier walked through the main doors again. This time, no one dared to stop him. Ashley, the receptionist who had told him, "Deliveries go in the back," sat frozen at her desk. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Xavier looked at her once. Not with malice, not with gloating, just recognition. Behind him, Danielle Rhodes walked confidently, holding the signed acquisition paperwork. Later that evening, in the executive wing now under renovation, Xavier stood by the corner window of what used to be Martin Brightwell's office. The skyline shimmered. The city hadn't changed, but he had changed how it saw him. Danielle stepped inside. "Your first address to the team is in the morning." "I know," he said. "You ready?" Xavier didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked around the office. The awards, the portraits, the legacy built on exclusion. "They thought they were guarding the gates," he said. "They didn't realize I was building the kingdom." Danielle smiled. "Well, kingdom's yours now." Xavier nodded once, and behind him, for the first time in years, the Brightwell nameplate came down. The following morning, tension hummed like static in the air as employees trickled into the Brightwell Enterprises building, now quietly under new ownership. Gone were the usual hushed jokes at the coffee machine, the whispered gossip by the elevators. In their place, uncertain silence. Every floor, from engineering to legal, had received the same calendar invite. Mandatory all-hands meeting, 9 a.m., 12th floor auditorium. Presenter, Xavier Cole, Executive Chair. People whispered his name like it was something unfamiliar, too sharp for comfort. For most of them, he had only been a myth, a name on a tech article, or the guy who once came through the lobby and was asked to use the back. But now, he was the one sending the emails. Upstairs, in the corner conference room, Mark Reynolds stared blankly at the glass wall. He hadn't slept. His tie was loose, his usual crisp appearance undone. "He played us," he muttered to Lila Davenport, who stood near the window, her arms folded tight. Lila glanced over. "He didn't play us. We underestimated him," Mark scoffed. Same thing. Downstairs, Xavier stood at the back of the auditorium for a moment, just watching. Rows of faces sat waiting, some familiar, most not. A sea of employees who had never seen him before, yet whose lives were now entwined with his decision to buy the company that once pushed him out like a nuisance. At exactly 9 a.m., he stepped up to the podium. No preamble, no assistant, just him and a quiet room full of eyes. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady. "I know some of you are wondering why I'm here, and why I now sit where Martin Brightwell once stood." A few people shifted in their seats, the gravity of his presence still settling in. "Let's be clear," he continued. "I didn't acquire Brightwell to tear it down. I acquired it because it tried to erase people like me, and I believe companies that erase people don't deserve to lead the future." Silence. "I remember standing in this building, just a few weeks ago, being told that deliveries go through the back, That one sentence told me everything I needed to know about how this place operated. There was a pause. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some looked down. Others looked right at him. "I'm not here to seek revenge," he said, his tone sharper now. "I'm here to make sure no one else gets shown the back door for the way they look, speak, or think." A single clap echoed from the back of the room, then another, and soon, a quiet wave of applause spread, cautious at first, then stronger. As the crowd settled, Xavier gestured to a small stack of folders beside him. "In the coming days, you'll see changes. Departments will be evaluated, not by loyalty or tenure, but by transparency, inclusion, and actual impact." Upstairs in Martin Brightwell's now former office, his old portrait had been removed. In its place, a digital screen displaying Xavier's favorite quote, "They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds." Later that day, as Xavier reviewed the company's outdated DEI policies, Danielle Rhodes entered his office, a laptop in one hand and a concerned look on her face. "There's something you should see," she said. She played a video that had been posted anonymously online that morning. Security footage from the day Xavier was escorted out. The full audio, raw and unedited. Ashley's voice could be heard clearly. So could the security guard's mocking tone. But what sent a chill through the room was how quickly it spread. Retweeted by celebrities, shared on LinkedIn by DEI advocates, dissected on business news shows. The title read, "New CEO of Brightwell was once thrown out of his own company's lobby." Xavier sat still for a moment, absorbing the wave of attention. Danielle folded her arms. "You want me to trace the source?" He shook his head. Let them see it. Let them all see it." By mid-afternoon, a press release followed. Not from PR, but from Xavier himself. "We cannot build the future by denying the past. I was that man in the lobby. I'm now the man at the helm. And we're rewriting the rules." It went viral in hours. At reception, Ashley received an email. "Meet with HR, 4 p.m. In the legal department, Mark Reynolds' assistant informed him that his executive review was scheduled for next week. And in the break rooms, employees began to talk. Not whispers now, but conversations. Honest ones. Hopeful ones. For the first time in a long time, Brightwell didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like the walls were finally coming down. That night, the office was nearly empty, except for the soft glow in one private corner. Danielle Rhodes sat in her cubicle, the overhead lights long dimmed. Her eyes were locked on a folder that had just been slipped under her door. No name attached. She opened it slowly, almost afraid of what she might find. Inside were scanned records, old HR logs, and a copy of a settlement agreement, dated nearly 20 years ago. At the top of the file, Xavier Cole. At the bottom, signed in neat cursive, Margaret Ellison, Brightwell's former head of legal. Her stomach tightened. These documents weren't part of public records. Someone wanted her to see this now, for a reason. She reached for her phone and dialed Xavier. "You might want to come down here." 15 minutes later, Xavier stood beside her desk, silent as Danielle slid the folder toward him. "I thought I knew everything," she said quietly. "But this changes the whole story." Xavier didn't speak. He didn't need to. His jaw clenched just enough to betray what was behind his stillness. These papers weren't news to him. They were a scar. "I was 19, he finally said. "Brightwell was my first job. Back then, I didn't even know how to use Excel properly. But I knew how to build things." Danielle listened. "There was this senior engineer, Eli Crawford. He took credit for one of my early prototypes. When I spoke up, HR told me to stay in my place. The next day, I was let go. No cause. Just a settlement." He looked at her now. "They gave me $5,000 and made me sign an NDA." Danielle leaned back. "That's illegal now." Xavier's eyes narrowed. "It wasn't then." He stood, pacing slowly. "I never told anyone. Not my mentors, not my investors, not even my mother. I buried it because I thought, if I said it out loud, it would define me. But it didn't," Danielle said. "Look where you are now." He looked out the window. "Yeah, but it's time the company that tried to silence me finally listened." The next morning, Xavier walked into the executive boardroom where the interim leadership team sat waiting. Mark, Lila, HR, legal, finance. He didn't take a seat. Instead, he placed the old HR file in the center of the table. "This was me," he said. 20 years ago, this company paid to erase my voice. That ends today." Mark looked pale. Xavier continued. Brightwell will not be rebranded with my name. It will be rebuilt, with transparency, equity, and memory. You can't move forward if you pretend the past didn't happen. Lila leaned forward. What are you planning? He turned to her. We're starting a full audit of all historical dismissals and settlements, and every department will undergo third-party review for bias, pay disparity, and promotion gaps. Mark scoffed. You're digging up ghosts, Xavier. No, Xavier replied calmly. I'm laying them to rest, finally. Later that day, in a dusty storage unit near the edge of town, Xavier unlocked a small metal box labeled Prototype 01 Coal. Inside lay a small, hand-soldered circuit board. It looked outdated, clunky even, but to him, it was sacred. He held it in his hands and smiled. This little board was the reason he'd been thrown out. And now, it was going into the Brightwell Company Museum, along with the truth. Xavier Cole stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his headquarters. The city stretched beneath him like a chessboard he had already played through. The sun hung low, casting amber streaks over glass towers. The same city that had once dismissed him now held its breath when he moved. Behind him, the final contracts with Datasphere were signed. Their neural encryption systems, once intended for Brightwell, were now fully integrated into Cole Innovations. Vanessa Lewis, now his chief technology officer, sat across from him with a calm professionalism that belied the storm they'd just weathered. They're saying Brightwell has officially filed, she said softly. I know, Xavier replied without turning. The collapse was complete. Brightwell Enterprises, a company that once held the power to change the industry, now sat in silent ruins. Lawsuits, government inquiries, mass resignations, none of it had been necessary to plan. All Xavier had done was show up, allow the system to react as it naturally did, and let the truth expose itself. But the ending wasn't about them anymore. It never really had been. What now? Vanessa asked. We've won. Xavier turned slowly. Number. We've just cleared the field. Now we build. He reached for a tablet on his desk and handed it to her. On the screen, digital renderings of a new facility shimmered in high resolution. A sweeping modern space filled with open labs, classrooms, and incubators for young tech visionaries. The Cole Center for Innovation. Vanessa blinked. Is this Brightwell's old headquarters? Xavier nodded once. They accepted our bid. The site is being repurposed into something better. A home for underestimated genius. She stared at the concept designs, her voice catching. You're turning the place that tried to erase us into a foundation for others like us? I'm turning it into what it should have been all along. Across the city, in a cold apartment filled with boxes, Ashley Monroe packed what remained of her corporate dreams. Her name had been dragged through every major headline. Interviews gone, apartment lease terminated, bank account frozen. A year ago, she'd been laughing at a man in the lobby. Now she struggled to find night shift work. Meanwhile, Mark Reynolds sat waiting outside a federal courtroom, indicted on charges of corporate espionage. He tapped his knee nervously, the weight of betrayal and arrogance finally catching up. He'd played a long game, but had underestimated who was holding the board. At Brightwell's empty headquarters, Richard Lawson walked through the echoing halls one last time. The walls still held echoes of power, but the silence now whispered of consequences. His empire had fallen, not by fire, but by exposure. And yet, it was never just about retribution. Later that week, the ribbon was cut on the Cole Center. Cameras flashed. The media tried to frame the story as a comeback, but Xavier refused the narrative. It's not a comeback, he said into the microphone. It's a recalibration, a redirection of power. We were never unqualified. We were simply unwelcome. The audience erupted in quiet applause. Not performative, real. Vanessa took the podium next, announcing education grants, innovation incubators, and partnership opportunities for minority-led startups. Her voice was calm, but strong. Back inside, in a quiet moment, Xavier watched young interns touring the halls. One paused by a wall that once held Brightwell's mission statement. Now, etched into the stone were just 3 words: respect, equity, legacy. Later that evening, Xavier sat on the terrace overlooking the city, joined by Vanessa. The skyline shimmered like a promise. You think they'll learn? She asked. Not all of them, he replied. But enough will. That's how change works. Not overnight, but step by step. She nodded, thoughtful. And if they don't? Then we keep building. Somewhere else. For someone else. Until they can't ignore us anymore. A text buzzed on Xavier's phone. It was a simple message from a young student at one of their new partner schools. Saw your story. Started my own code project today. Hope I can build something like you someday. He smiled quietly. Change had come, not with anger but with clarity. Power didn't just belong to those who had always had it. It belonged to those willing to use it, not to dominate, but to uplift. This wasn't the end of Xavier Cole's story. It was only the beginning of everyone else's.